Hello class, in this quick video tutorial I'm going to show you or provide you more information about the Windows artifacts that I covered or didn't have a chance to cover in class but were on my notes. Just wanted to go through those real quick and have you guys learn more about those because we might actually use them in the lab. The files that I'll be covering today are the artifacts, are the info2 file, the page file, or more commonly known as the swap file, the printer spool, link files. Then I'll talk about the Windows Registry, and then I'll probably also show you a little bit about the event log and information you can capture from that as well. So anyways, to get started, let's get started with the info2 file. The info2 file, what it is basically a database that contains information about the files in the recycle bin. So anytime you delete something and it goes to the recycle bin, the information about those files actually get posted to this database. Now also, before I get started, I forgot to mention I'm going to be using the report feature to show you guys how you can actually track certain information. So for example, I want to talk about certain files and sometimes they're hard to find, so I'm going to actually use this report to tell me where they're at. For example, the info2 folder, I see here that it's found within C users, FMPC desktop, and under C recyclers, and then info2. So anyways, that's where that information comes from, and I just wanted to show you guys that. And actually, disregard the first part here. I was actually noticing that the C users FMPC desktop, disregard this part here when you look at ProDiscover Basic. One thing it does is it actually points to the file that you're looking at. So this mp001.001 file is my image file, and it actually is telling me where that file is contained within the current host operating system where I'm running ProDiscover Basic, which is a little confusing since I'm used to looking at Ncase, and Ncase doesn't bring anything from the host system. So anyways, the actual path to this file is C recyclers, then the SID here, and then this info2. So let's take a look at it. So again, C, so we'll go to Content View, we'll open it up, and then C recyclers within this file, and then info2. There it is. And as you can see, I have it selected, and that's why it's in my report. So again, the info2 is a database that contains information about files that are contained in the recycle bin. And the information that it provides is basically the name of the file and the destination or the location where that file was contained. Or was originally contained. So for example, here we have this JPEG image that was contained within my pictures until it got deleted and sent to the recycler, and then this other text file here that was also sent to the recycler. One thing you'll notice is that those two files are actually still in the recycler, and they're right here. There's this DC1 and DC2. The D stands for deleted, so anytime a file gets deleted and sent to the recycler, the name gets changed. And that's why it's important to look at the info2 file, because a lot of times you won't know what the name of the file was unless you look at the info2 file, and then you can tell what the name of the file. For example, this popwm.jpg file here is actually the same as this DC1 JPEG file. So that's why it's important, and that's why that info2 file can provide you a lot of good information. So again, that these two files are actually still in the recycle bin, and that their information is contained here in info2. Earlier in my first video, I talked about undeleting files. These ones are not yet considered deleted because they're sent to the recycle bin, but the recycle bin hasn't been emptied out. So I can still recover these files or remove them from the recycle bin by doing the same thing as you would do for an undeleted file, and that's right-click on the file, copy file, and then select it, your source, click OK or save, and that would send it to the desktop or to your source destination. In this case, this is an image that I deleted and sent to the recycler that I did for my earlier lab, and there it is. Okay, so there it is, the info2 file, database, and contains some definitely some good information you want to look at. Okay, the next file I want to talk about is the page file, or what's more commonly known as the swap file. Again, if we go back to the reports, and we can tell the location of that file by looking at it right here. And that file is typically contained within the root file, or the root folder, I'm sorry, and that's where it currently is for this system. So there it is. So what is the page file? The page file basically, or the swap file, is a file that gets created when because the operating system typically has a limited amount of RAM. And when files or information is sent to the RAM and the RAM captures that information as it's being worked by the operating system, it's contained in that memory. However, when the file stops getting worked on, for example, if you're working on a Word document and you stop working on it, and then you open other files, for example, an Excel spreadsheet or a video or music or something, and that information or that data it has to go up to memory so it can be worked on by the computer. And it's being worked on, something has to happen with the memory that's stored in memory, because otherwise it just gets overwritten. Or typically what happens, let's say you actually have a Word file and you close it, then it gets written back to the hard drive. But if that file's still open, what will happen is that information being stored in that file gets sent to the page file itself, or the swap file. So the reason the page file is critical is that there actually might be information within the page file that you can extract. So for example, if you did a search like we did earlier in the first lab or the video, and you ran it against a page file, you might have information in there. You might have text files, you might have maybe a picture or something of that case. And if you do find something, you can actually typically take that information and carve it out the page file and then send it to an external source for more analysis. So again, that's the page file. That's why it's important. And another file that I didn't have written down in the notes, and I won't be able to show you, but it's important also. It's another file called the hiberfil.sys, HIBERFIL.sys. And basically what that file does is it does something similar to the page file or swap file. If you have a Microsoft Windows computer open and then you close the screen, typically when you close the screen, that machine will go into what they call a hibernate state. You haven't actually turned off the machine itself, you just put it into hibernate. Well, that information that's captured from that you have open, let's say it's a Word document or a picture or something, has to go somewhere. It's not written back down to the desktop or to the hard drive, I'm sorry, so it has to go somewhere. And typically what happens is it's actually written to this hiberfil.sys file and retained there. So if you as an investigator come across a file called hiberfil.sys, it's definitely another type of file you want to pay attention to, because again, you can actually have evidentiary data within that file you can later on extract or carve out of it. So that's the page file and hiberfil.sys file. Okay, the next type of files I'm going to talk about are those link files that I had on there. And again, I told you guys in class a little bit about the link files, but we'll give you more information here. And let's see if I can find one. So there it is. We'll go to all files and we'll look through here and find just one. And typically they're pretty easy. There we go. So the best way to describe a link file is all it is just a link to an application, to a program, to a video, to some type of data file. The one way to explain it here within this operating system is if I go into the ProDiscover Basic link here and I go to properties, this link file is actually telling me where the actual target or the executable for this link is. So this is where it's at, and it tells me the full path of where it resides. So I know by looking at it that this one resides in the C program files folder. So if we go back to ProDiscover, so the reason that the link files are actually important is that let's say you had an individual who brought an application, a pen test application or a hacking application, or files that are important, but they brought them in a USB thumb drive. And they plugged in the thumb drive to a computer, to the evidence computer. They executed those files from that computer, and then later on removed the thumb drive and closed the applications. Well, if you were doing your evidence or you're doing your analysis, you are definitely not going to find the files that were within that USB thumb drive, because they are in the thumb drive. But one thing you probably will find is that when they executed the file or opened the file, the computer read that file, but it also created a link file at that point in time. So when you look at those link files, it tells you quite a bit of information. At that point, I can tell you the actual destination of where the file exists. So right now we're looking at the Notepad link file, and it tells us, of course, that the link is pointing to this notepad.exe. Well, in that example that I gave you, let's say it's the USB was on the D drive or the E drive. That's what I would tell you. It would be the E drive or the D drive right here, and then it would actually point to the folder structure and then to the name of the file. Another good example is when I'm doing pornographic cases or of pornographic content. Typically I will find link files that have pornographic names, and if somebody tells me no, I did not execute any pornographic files on my machine, I can then show them that even though they were in an external device like a USB thumb drive or an external hard drive, the link file still points to a file by with pornographic content or type of naming structure, and that it was executed from that machine. So again, it's a good way to look at what's been executed within the machine. Gives you possible new artifacts that can point you in new directions. Maybe you can add to your word list that you can look for things later on, and so forth and so on. So those are your link files. Okay, the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is the spool file. The spool file is basically has to do with printing. So let me go back and we'll take a look at it. And again, I'm doing this just to show you guys how to use the reporting feature, which is a great feature in ProDiscover Basic. So your actual spool files are going to be found under the C Windows System 32 spool printers directories. So if we go in there, so Windows System 32. Did I miss it? Spool printers. Here we go. There we go. So the spool file itself, or the directory itself, will contain information or two files that will typically be created simultaneously when a print job is executed. Typically what happens is before a print job gets sent to a printer, it gets stored on the desktop or on the PC, and then gets sent to the printer. And at that point, what will typically happen is, what will happen is you'll have two files that are created, and these will always be created. You'll have your shadow or SHD file, and then your spool file or SPL file. And again, these will typically be created at the same time. Now, why are they important? Well, for two reasons. One, it might provide you information about certain documents that were printed, when they were printed, some file names that, what they were called. And this one is good, for example, in a case where there might be proprietary data or intelligent data that was stolen from a company, and the way they stole it is they printed it out. Well, you might be able to make a case by looking at these files as to what was printed out and so forth and so on. The shadow copy, or the shadow file, I'm sorry, basically what it contains is information about that print job. It's kind of like a ticket, a job ticket. It says, okay, where was it print to, what printer, and possibly what's some of the resolution, and maybe might even tell you as well from what computer or what network drive. So here we have information, and then it also will tell you in what type of format it was printed. You can see here that says it's EMF. EMF stands for Microsoft Enhanced Meta File. Basically, when you set up a printer, you can set it up to print in two modes. It can either be in EMF mode or RAW mode, and by default is EMF. RAW mode is typically used for things like GIS photos or GIS maps and so forth and so on. The important distinction is that the RAW files basically is sent, it sends the information just in raw text. It just sends the binary information across and it sends it to the printer. The printer will take it, and if it can read RAW, it will actually print it. The EMF file, on the other hand, is actually a container for your print job, and that container will contain information about the print, or actually will contain your print data, and then information that is also stored within that shadow file. The reason it's important to know the difference is that an EMF file has to be read by a certain special type of reader or viewer, and it's not something you can typically do with Windows XP unless you install special tools. Within Encase, the other tool that I use, it actually has a viewer that you can tell in case that file is an EMF file, and it will use those special viewers to provide you more information about that file. So again, the importance of the shadow files, or I'm sorry, the spool files, is that they actually might contain information about what was printed and may even contain information or the actual data that was printed and sent to the printer. Now, something to keep in mind, especially when you're getting into networking or networks, or if you work in an enterprise or e-discovery, is that when you send something to the printer, it keeps and stores that data on your local machine, but it also might store that data on a server somewhere. If you have a print server that's printing or that's actually keeping all your print files and managing those printers, that spool file actually might contain information that's on the server as well. So just something to keep in mind. You always have to look at possible locations where evidence might be contained, and that's another one that you might want to look at. Okay, so that's your spool files. The next one we'll talk about then is the Windows Registry. And again, within ProDiscover, what you have to do is you have to point ProDiscover as, or tell ProDiscover where those registry files are. And again, the way to do that is you can just go under Content View. The registry files are typically under Windows, or they should be under Windows. Do a right click and say Add to Registry Viewer. And then that would just add the contents of the registry files into this viewer, and you can start looking at it from there. So the registry viewer, or the registry, why is it important? Well, two reasons. One, it allows you to see the native state of the machine when you found it. So what patches were installed, what service pack does it have, what Windows version is it, who might own it, things of that nature. But more importantly, it also will tell you information that you might not be able to see just by looking at your analysis or content here within the content view part of it. For example, if someone installed an application, let's say a pen test or some type of hacking tool of a kind, one thing you might be able to do is actually look and within the registry and see that application that had been installed. Because if the person was smart enough, what they could have done is gone in, undeleted or removed the application, then deleted the program files or the folder for that application under program files, and then left it at that. But if that's what they did, you're still going to find that software registry entry within the registry and be able to tell that there was an application indeed installed that was named X, Y, and Z, and then you can start doing research as to what that application does. So another way to pick up information about applications that may have been on the system and then were deleted or removed. But the other important thing is you can also tell more information about the operating system. I did tell you that the image I created was Windows XP, but by looking at the directory itself, you might not have known that. I mean, we know it's probably a Windows system because it has a Windows folder, but does that really tell you more than that? Not really. I mean, I can tell because I have experience with Windows operating systems, but if you wanted to be sure, you can actually use the registry to tell you what version of Windows you're running or what version of Office or what other applications you're running. So let's just pick the Windows version. So let's say I want to know what Windows version I'm running on this, or was running on that image file or that evidentiary file. The way to do that is you go to Local Machine, Software, Microsoft, and then you scroll all the way down. And you'll find a folder called Windows NT all the way down. And then within Windows NT, you'll find another folder called Current Version. And if you click on that, and you go all the way down on current version, on the current version folder, it'll give you more information. It'll actually give you keys, registry keys, that tell you more information about the product or the version. This one says that the product name is Windows XP. The registered owner is BSU, because that's why I created this VM under. And then the current version is 5.1. The latest, or the service pack, the current service pack on this machine is Service Pack 3. And then this one actually tells you where your system root is, if that's been changed or something's changed there, or so forth and so on. Sometimes users might actually change the root folder to something different other than C Windows. So again, that gives you just more information of the operating system, and the registry or being able to look at the registry will allow you to also look at what other applications were installed, and also what type of policies that the system have. The banner that we talked about in class, was that actually on, or was it off? Was that one of the policies that was turned on or off? So if the user says, well, there was no banner there, so you guys shouldn't have, you had no consent to look at my machine, you can go into the registry and say, yes, the banner was on, and here's what the banner says. So just another way to use the registry. The last thing I want to show you is the event log. So let's go ahead and scroll this and minimize this window here. And the reason I want to show you the event log is it's also very handy when you're looking at cases where you want to know, or you want to see when a user logged on, or what user was logged on when the incident occurred, or did anything happen? Was there a warning message that came up, or was there a critical message that came up that we're not aware of, or something to that nature? So the way to look at the event log is just to look at the event log view. And again, the way to actually bring it up or populate it is if you go into Windows, you can do add event log viewer, and that will actually populate the event log at this point here. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the system log. Again, this is a virtual machine, so it doesn't have a lot of logs, but certain type of log files that you might be interested, or what they call the event IDs, or ones for like logging off, or logging, or starting up or shutting down. So for example, if you have event ID 3004, then you know that machine was just started. Or if you have event ID 3003, then you know that machine was shut down at that point. So that's another good part of information that you want to use. The other reason that I've used it in the past is, again, when I have misuse cases, I always want to prove that that user indeed was logged on. So what I do is I look at not only the startup time, but also the login time, and I look at for different logs involving a user. And this is where that SID I was talking about earlier actually comes into play, because either you'll get a username or you'll get a SID number. You'll have to translate that SID number using Active Directory tools, and that will typically give you the user account number of that individual. So one thing I will do when I do my timeline analysis that we talked about is note the time the machine was booted up, when the user logged in, and then when the event occurred. So if somebody was looking at pornographic images, or somebody deleted a file, or somebody transferred a file, or emailed a file to themselves, whatever it was, I want to prove that the event actually happened while that user was logged in. And that's the way you can do it, is through the event viewer. There's other things you actually want to look at here too. For example, if the machine happened to blue screen, there might be an event log about that, which at that point you actually might have a dump file you can analyze. The other thing too is if there's any issues with the workstation that might actually, or with the PC, that might actually tell you why certain artifacts are being found. For example, if you had an application that was not responding properly, let's say it's a network application, and you're getting a lot of information through the system or through the network connection, that might actually be populated here, and that might help you in your case to prove that something did or didn't happen, or there's a reason why you have so much of some type of data. I can't come up with any recent examples, but I can easily see that if we had an issue with one of the network cards, and it was sending a lot of pings, or was sending a lot of information across the network, that actually might come up in the event ID, and then that might be able to tell you why that machine had so much data. If there was like an incident, or one of your IDSs said this machine has way too much data coming out of it, well, you might be able to correlate that with the event ID from that machine. So again, just another example from the incident response side of things. So that pretty much does it for all the files that I wanted to cover. I think I covered most of the ones that I talked about or didn't have a chance to talk about in class, and I had in my paper. But again, we're just scratching the surface as to what ProDiscover can do. So I still highly recommend you guys look at the guidebook before the class, and then be able to look at how do you add the evidence files, how do you look at the analysis, and then how do you look at the registry, the event logs, internet history, everything we talked about, the searches and so forth. And then also how do you create your report and export your report. So yeah, certain things to look at and to think about. Anyways, that's it for tonight. So thank you very much, and we'll see you guys in class.